Prosecutors seek to extend the detention of President Yoon until February 6 as they launch their investigation into charges of insurrection made against him, which was handed over to them by the CIO. They could visit the detained president this weekend for questioning. U.S. President Donald Trump insinuated resuming summit diplomacy with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, saying he would reach out to Kim in a recent interview. Mass travel begins in Korea on this Friday evening as an extended Lunar New Year holiday starts this weekend. It's January 24th, 8 p.m. in Seoul. This is Newscenter. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. We start with the prosecution's probe into allegations of insurrection by the president in light of his short-lived martial law on the night of December 3rd. For details, I have our Choi Min-jung standing by live at the prosecutor's office here in Seoul. Min-jung, prosecutors are seeking to further extend the president's detention.
Right, Jung-min, the prosecution does not have much time with the detention deadline approaching as early as the 26th of January. And because of the tight schedule, we learned just a few hours ago that the investigation team had already requested with the Seoul Central District Court yesterday an extension of President Yoon's detention until February 6th. If approved, that would allow more time for the prosecutors to investigate. Under such a plan, the prosecution is expected to make every effort to interrogate President Yoon. They also plan to continue the investigation throughout the weekend and even during the upcoming Lunar New Year holiday. Considering past cases of former presidents who were detained, prosecutors will likely visit President Yoon at the Seoul Detention Center for questioning rather than summoning him to the prosecution office due to security and confidentiality concerns. Previously, when former presidents Chun Do-han, Roh Tae-woo, Park Geun-hye, and Lee Myung-bak were detained, the prosecution conducted their investigations at the prison. The prosecution is reportedly only willing to question Yoon in person given the gravity of the case.
And what has been the response from his defense team?
Right, the question is whether Yoon will respond to the prosecution's investigation. But given his team's latest response, they appear unlikely to cooperate. Around an hour ago, Yoon's legal team released a statement criticizing the prosecution's handling of the situation. It argued that the prosecution should cancel the president's detention and wait for the impeachment trial to proceed. The statement stressed that keeping the president in detention could interfere with the impeachment process. The team also stated that the prosecution should disregard the illegal investigation conducted by the CIO and start a fresh investigation. Hours ago, Yoon's lawyers Yoon Gov't and Kim Jong-un briefly stopped by and told reporters that they came to convey their thoughts to the prosecution. Though exact details were not revealed, they may have discussed scheduling coordination with the investigators. But just to give you a brief background, the prosecution's special investigation team took the case back yesterday after the anti-corruption agency formally requested that the prosecution take over the investigation. The case was handed over earlier than planned due to President Yoon's refusal to cooperate with the CIO. That's all I have for now. Back to you, Jung-min.
All right, Min-jung, thank you for the latest. Moving on, Korea is looking ahead to an extended Lunar New Year holiday starting this weekend. For those seeking an early start to the journey back to their hometowns for Seollal celebrations with family and friends, today is travel day. Our correspondent Song Yoo-jin joins us live from a major transport hub here in Seoul. Happy holiday, Yoo-jin. What is the latest on the hustle and bustle where you are?
Well, happy holiday to you too, Jung-min, from Seoul Station, which is the busiest train station here in Korea. Now, as you mentioned, today is the eve of the 6-day-long Seollal, or Korean Lunar New Year holiday, which is one of the two major holidays here in the country, with the other being Chuseok, often called Korean Thanksgiving. So our team, we've been out here for almost 5 hours now, and I've been seeing the station becoming more increasingly crowded, especially after 6 p.m. We saw a significant influx of travelers coming here to the station. Station, which is the time most people will have finished work. So if we look at some data, according to the latest data from the country's state-run railway operator Korea, more than 76% of nearly 340,000 available train tickets from this train station have already been booked as of 3 p.m. And in fact, we're still seeing more and more notices on the big screens here that some trains are sold out, which really shows the holiday travel rush. And earlier, I spoke with some travelers about how excited they are for the upcoming holiday. Take a listen.
I want to relax with my family. I've been quite busy leading up to this holiday, so I want to visit cafes and travel with them.
Right now, I'm living with a host family, so I'm thinking maybe with my host family, maybe we'll make some like tteokguk, or I think maybe we may vacation a little bit outside of Seoul, maybe to Everland. I'll see what happens. But I also have some friends here, so I think I may hang out with them as well.
I haven't been able to visit my grandmother for quite a while because I've been preparing for a new job. I'm going to meet her and tell her I'll do my best.
The holiday is so long that I'm a bit worried about how to spend all that time with my daughter. But I think she'll be really happy to see her grandparents after such a long time.
Happy holiday plans. Now let's talk about numbers. How many people are projected to travel and when would be ideal?
Right, so ahead of every Seollal holiday season, the Transport Ministry announces what it calls a Special Transportation Measures Period. And this year, this period spans 10 days, starting from today up until next Sunday, which is February 2nd. And this could be because if you take next Friday, which is January 31st off, that means you get to enjoy a 9-day long break. So during this 10-day period, the Korea Transport Institute estimates that around 34 million people will take to the roads, skies, and other forms of transport. And that's an increase of nearly 8 million compared to last year when the transportation period was just 5 days. And the Institute predicts that Seollal Day itself, which is next Wednesday, will be the busiest in terms of volume with approximately 6 million people traveling. But it seems that the days just before and after Seollal Day will also be difficult to move, as an online survey conducted by this institute shows that Tuesday morning is the most preferred time for starting trips, while Thursday afternoon is expected to be the most popular time for returning home. So to help ease the burden for travelers, motorway tolls will be lifted from Monday to Thursday, and discounts will be offered for train tickets and snacks at highway rest stops. So if you're planning your schedule this holiday season, keep this in mind.
And Eugene, as our culture correspondent, I hear you have a special recommendation for those passing through Seoul Station.
Right, so just a short walk from here is the old Seoul Station building, which first opened in 1925. Now, that area has been operated as a railroad station until 2003, but then it reopened in 2011 with a new name called Culture Station Seoul 284 as a space for exhibitions, performances, and workshops. And currently, 2 exhibitions are being held there, all with no admission charge. They're completely free. So if you're around this area during this holiday season, it's definitely worth checking out. Or if you don't have the time, you can tune into my full report, which will air next Tuesday, just ahead of Seollal. That's all we have for now. Back to you, Jungmin.
Thanks for the info. That was our Song Yujin live from Seoul Station. Meanwhile, lawmakers across the aisle also made their way to major bus and train stations on this Friday here in Seoul to meet with travelers as they head home for the Lunar New Year holiday. Members of the ruling People Power Party were at Seoul Station, while their counterparts, the main opposition Democratic Party, were at Seoul Express Bus Terminal. During their brief interactions with members of the public, rival lawmakers pledged to promote issues related to the cost of living for ordinary people. With the holiday just around the corner, the authorities are making sure that the emergency medical system is managed in a stable manner. Our Park Go-nu has more.
Efforts to stabilize the emergency medical system are underway. During a central disaster meeting on Friday, Acting President Choi Sang-mok emphasized that stabilizing the system during the upcoming Seollal holidays was crucial.
The government and local authorities will focus their efforts on ensuring the smooth implementation of special measures to maintain the emergency medical system so people can spend the holidays peacefully.
This comes after the emergency medical response period was set for 2 weeks from January 22nd to cover the holidays. Choi said all domestic emergency medical facilities are being monitored around the clock, with medical officers dispatched. He also stressed that every effort will be made to provide specialized care for high-risk pregnant women, nighttime pediatric care, and other special conditions. Choi also urged that emergency rooms be prioritized for those who are in real need.
If you have an urgent problem, call 119. If not, please visit a local clinic or small to medium-sized hospital emergency room first.
The government said more hospitals will be open during the holidays, up by over 360% from last year's Seollal holidays. The National Fire Agency will also increase its emergency personnel and medical consultations beyond normal levels. Korean nationals living abroad or traveling can also receive consultations through the agency's internet or social media channels. The health authorities advise caution regarding respiratory diseases during the holidays, even though the flu season peak has passed. The Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency said people should follow infectious disease prevention measures, including maintaining hygiene and ventilation, and especially high-risk groups should get vaccinated as the flu season continues. Park Gun-woo, Arirang News.
U.S. President Donald Trump has expressed a willingness to reinitiate talks with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, calling him smart. This has sparked renewed attention to Pyongyang-Washington relations. Our correspondent Kim Jong-sil reports.
U.S. President Donald Trump has reignited discussions on North Korea, revealing plans to resume diplomatic talks with Kim Jong-un. Take a listen to his interview with Fox News on Thursday.
He happens to be a smart guy. Kim Jong-un is a smart guy.
You'll reach out to him again.
I will.
This comment came just days after Trump referred to North Korea as a nuclear power.
We got along very well. They thought that was a tremendous threat. Now he is a nuclear power, but we got along. I think he'll be happy to see him coming back.
Trump's remarks suggest a desire to restart diplomatic efforts even while North Korea's advancing nuclear capabilities remain a critical concern. Experts predict that the threat of the North will continue to be a major focus of global security in the coming years.
Most people are of the mind that North Korea, the threat from North Korea, will really become front and center in the next 4 years.
Kim isn't the only leader Trump called smart. He also praised Russian President Vladimir Putin, claiming again that the invasion of Ukraine would never have happened under his leadership.
Never. By the way, Russia never would have gone into Ukraine. I had a very strong understanding with Putin. He's smart. He understands. He disrespected Biden.
Trump's comments highlight the shifting geopolitical landscape, with Russia's growing ties to North Korea complicating U.S. foreign policy. For South Korea, these developments are critical. Ambassador Cho Yeon-dong told reporters in Washington, D.C. on Thursday that Seoul was closely communicating with key members of the Trump administration. Cho noted that the ongoing cooperation between the two countries, particularly on security issues and North Korea's denuclearization, remains a priority. As the world watches closely, South Korea is poised to navigate these changes carefully with a keen eye on maintaining stability on the Korean peninsula. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
While there is no indication of an imminent provocation, North Korea looks to be prepared for an intercontinental ballistic missile launch or a satellite mission at any time. Our defense correspondent Kim Bo-kyung reports.
No immediate signs of North Korean missile launches have been detected since Trump's inauguration, but preparations for a spy satellite or an ICBM continue. This is the recent assessment made by the Joint Chiefs of Staff on North Korea released on Friday. Regarding Pyongyang's potential missile launches, the regime had earlier this month already fired 2 missiles before Trump was sworn in as the new U.S. president. And the JCS says the North appears to be ready to launch short-range ballistic and cruise missiles at any time. Yet, as Trump has delivered a message to resume talks, one expert says it is unlikely that Pyongyang will be highly provocative.
In response to President Trump's conciliatory message, it is unlikely that North Korea will conduct a high-intensity display of force, such as an ICBM launch.
Meanwhile, Pyongyang has been dismantling and removing the materials from the Kaesong Industrial Complex's Comprehensive Support Center for over a month, since mid-December last year. Considering that North Korea had shown similar activities before demolishing the Inter-Korean Liaison Office in June 2020, the same expert again says the possibility of utterly blowing up the complex would take some time.
North Korea has already dismantled symbolic South Korean buildings and facilities in the Kumgangsan mountain area and destroyed the Inter-Korean Liaison Office. Given that it is unclear what benefit would come from destroying the Kaesong Industrial Complex, they could dismantle, but it would take time to demolish.
When it comes to North Korea sending troops to Russia, the South's military expects Pyongyang to accelerate preparations for additional deployments, with around 4 months already having passed since the first troop deployment. It is likely, given the fact that the battle nearing its end could get fierce, but the experts said the relationship between Russia and the U.S. could bring a change in Kim Jong-un's decision. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Elsewhere, in his first address to a global audience following his return to the White House, President Trump called on companies worldwide to make their products in America or face hefty tariffs. Moon Hye-ryun explains.
Come make your product in America, and we will give you among the lowest taxes of any nation on earth.
U.S. President Donald Trump emphasized his stance on tariffs once again in front of the global elite at the annual World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, as he followed up his push to bring manufacturing into the U.S. with a threat to impose levies for foreign goods.
But if you don't make your product in America, which is your prerogative, then very simply you will have to pay a tariff.
Speaking in a video call on Thursday at his first major appearance since his inauguration earlier this week, Trump went on to describe how these tariffs will add up to trillions of dollars to strengthen the U.S. economy. This follows an earlier announcement that he plans to impose tariffs of 25% on Mexico and Canada starting February, alongside a 10% tariff for China. During the rest of his 45-minute speech, he went on to lay out more of his vision for the U.S. economy, which includes lowering the corporate tax to 15% from the current 21%, lowering energy costs by pressuring OPEC, and lowering interest rates in turn. And in a panel discussion following his speech, he addressed the European Union for its substantial trade imbalance with the United States and condemned their regulatory actions against American tech giants such as Apple, Google, and Facebook. His comments spurred a chain of reactions. Oil prices fell, the greenback showed fluctuations, and U.S. stocks rose. It also inspired commentary from attendees, who called for a measured response to Trump's tariff policies, cautioning against hasty retaliatory actions. The Director General of the World Trade Organization called for careful analysis to examine the economic impact to gauge whether they are excessive, and warned that retaliatory tariffs can have disastrous effects on the global economy. The European Union's Economic Commissioner echoed this sentiment, while some attendees showed a more nuanced understanding of Trump's approach to tariffs by viewing it as a bargaining tool. Trump also advocated for a reduction in nuclear arms and urged for global cooperation at the forum, stating that he had discussed the matter with Russian President Vladimir Putin prior to the 2020 U.S. presidential election. He revealed that Putin had been receptive to the idea of nuclear disarmament and that China would have joined the initiative, warning that Beijing is rapidly expanding its nuclear arsenal and could catch up with the U.S. in a few years. Moon Hye-ryun, Arirang News.
A number of Buddhist temples in Korea are offering unique overnight experiences to coincide with the Lunar New Year holiday. Our Yoon has a glimpse.
A unique sanctuary nestled in the heart of Seoul City, Seollal Temple is offering a special temple stay for the first time during the Seollal holidays, so participants can experience the holidays' traditions.
At Seollal, we introduced dumpling making as part of our temple stay program to bring back traditional holiday customs. Nowadays, with more people living in nuclear families or traveling abroad, it's hard to experience the warmth and togetherness of the holidays. We wanted to create a space where families or individuals spending the holidays alone could come together, even for just one night.
Mong Sunhae shared that through activities like making dumplings, eating rice cakes, and sharing tea, she hopes to foster a warm sense of family and connection. This is the purpose behind many special programs, including a Lunar New Year ceremony and folk games. The cultural core of Korean Buddhism is hosting the Seollal Temple Stay at over 20 temples nationwide from January 22nd to January 30th.
I came here to clear my mind because I've been feeling stressed at work.
I'm having a lot of fun. It's my first time making dumplings and I'm really enjoying it.
Events like this bring out each person's unique personality. Some participants express their New Year's wishes through the dumplings they made.
This dumpling is called the sun dumpling. I made it to symbolize the rising sun of the new year, wishing for a bright year ahead.
To start the new year meaningfully, we decided to join a temple stay before the semester begins.
As they taste the dumplings they've made, along with healthy, vegetarian, and environmentally friendly temple food, participants gain a deeper appreciation for the effort that went into preparing these dishes. No Seollal celebration is complete without enjoying a bowl of tteokguk or rice cake soup. From preparation to consumption, every step in the temple is a daily practice. Practicing the performing of 108 vows, which symbolizes the purification of 108 temptations, participants have time to reflect. The evening at the Seollal Temple is the perfect time to focus on the present moment. This Seollal holiday, why not take a break from your smartphone and immerse yourself into seasonal traditions by experiencing a temple stay with friends or family. 이은희, Arirang News.
Seoul has weather like early spring today. Also ahead of the holiday, most of the fine dust has cleared. This clear and warm conditions will continue throughout the weekend. There has been rain or snow from the afternoon along the East Coast. It will relieve the dryness of the atmosphere. As for the snowfall, up to 15 centimeters of snow is forecast in the mountainous areas of Gangwon-do province by tomorrow. There's a possibility of heavy snow advisories in this area. Up to 5 centimeters of snow is expected on the east coast of Gangwon-do and the mountainous areas of northeastern Gyeongsang-buk-do province. Tomorrow, Daejeon will start off at -2 degrees Celsius, Busan 5 degrees. Daily highs will move up to around 10 degrees in most parts of the country tomorrow. On next Monday and Tuesday, more rain and snow is forecast all over the country. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That does it for us at this hour. Thank you for watching. Newscenter will be back next Friday after the Lunar New Year break. But more news will be coming up on Monday at noon Korea time. Happy holidays.
How to survive in Korea. Barbecue restaurants. Step 1. Taking care of your clothes. Put your jacket in the plastic bag. Seal it tight. If the stool flips open, store your clothes inside. Wearing light colors? Grab an apron. It's the best defense against oil splatter and smoke. Step 2. Bottomless side dishes. Basic side dishes at a barbecue restaurant. Eat, and eat as much as you want. Side dishes come with free refills. Oh, and if you don't see this sign, just ask, 사장님, 여기 밑반찬 좀 더 주세요. Simple, isn't it? Step 3. Grilling meat. There are various kinds of samgyeopsal in Korea. Place the meat on the grill. Turn it over when golden. And again when it looks done. Again and again and again. Step 4. Sam style. You aren't taking bites of sam like a taco, are you? In Korea, we have it in one bite. A pro tip here. Add only as much as you can handle in a bite. Gotta avoid awkward situations. Step 5. Enjoy the perks. After the meal, enjoy the perks offered as a Korean restaurant. Fabric refreshers get rid of the barbecue smell, while mint candies freshen your breath. Did you survive the barbecue restaurant? Hang on. Are you here with someone you want to impress? Then let's skip the garlic. Who knows what will happen?
도망치고 싶다. 그를 잡지 못하면 난 무언가 아예 무릎을 꿇어버리고 모든 것을 포기할까. 오케이.
Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring you today's most pressing issues from across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mo-gyan. South Korean prosecutors filed for an extension of the arrest warrant for President Yoon Suk-yeol on Friday as they seek to speed up the investigation into his short-lived martial law declaration. Now, this request submitted to the Seoul Central District Court could keep Yoon in detention until February 6th, pending approval. The move follows the transfer of the case from the Corruption Investigation Office for high-ranking officials to the prosecution, as the agency lacks the authority to indict a sitting president. With a potential in-person interrogation on the horizon, questions remain about President Yoon's cooperation and the implications of the unfolding legal battle. For more on this, we invite Cho Hee-kyung, professor of law at Hongik University, with us. Welcome, Professor.
Hello, good to be here.
And also joining us is Lee Hee-yeon, Dean and Professor of Law at Handong International Law School. Great to have you, Professor.
Always a pleasure to be with you.
So, Professor Lee, today prosecutors applied for an extension to keep President Yoon detained for a longer period of time. Could you explain for us the procedure of this? And is there a possibility that the court may deny the extension offer?
Right, as you were saying, basically right now, the hearing for whether the extension of the warrant is happening right now. And so the procedure by which the prosecutors must seek a warrant or extension in this case is to go to the court to get that extension. Because normally when a suspect is being detained, right, the suspect, of course, has civil rights. And there has to be justification in order to go beyond the initial 10-day period, which the CIO, the Corruption Investigation Office, they originally got an arrest warrant and detention warrant against the president for the initial investigation by the CIO. And that was, of course, issued by the Seoul Western District Court. But in this case, because the case has now been transferred to the prosecutor's office, now the jurisdiction or the venue has changed to the Seoul Central District Court. And so in this case, if they want to go beyond the initial 10-day period, they have to get a 10-day extension. And that's where the prosecutors are arguing for the extension. Now, under the Criminal Procedure Act of Korea, there are two provisions which govern detention. And so that's Article 201 and Article 70 of the Criminal Procedure Act. And so the underlying basis for which you can detain someone, really in this case, the relevant portion is Article 70. In this case, it's whether or not the suspect is going to potentially destroy evidence. There's no indication, of course, that President Yoon will flee the country, given his profile. But as far as destruction of evidence, that's the main reason by which the prosecutors are seeking his detention. So in this case, that's what the judges are going to have to sort of figure out, and whether or not that's really going to happen or potentially going to happen, and that's the basis for which the extension is going to be given. So because the court originally gave an detention, I don't think there's any reason to believe that the court won't, in this case, decide to extend it. So I'd be very surprised if the court actually doesn't extend the detention period.
So it's highly likely to be extended. Now, then, if the court grants the extension, the expected end time of the detention period is going to be until the 6th of next month. In this case, President Yoon will be interrogated while still in detention. Professor Cho, if this scenario proceeds as planned, when could we possibly expect a trial verdict?
That's actually getting way ahead of ourselves because at the end of the detention period, the prosecution office has to decide whether they're going to indict the accused, in this case, Mr. Yoon, and on what charges. Now, obviously, the charge of insurrection is going to be a likely crime that he will be indicted with. But we don't know what other crimes that he might be charged with and what other, potential crimes that the prosecution has been investigating. I mean, there are, a handful just that immediately spring to mind, such as abuse of office, destruction of evidence, because while he was cooped up in his presidential residence in Hannam-dong, we have some reports that he actually ordered destruction of certain equipment and servers and erasing of records, etc., etc. And so I suspect the prosecution has been investigating those acts as well. There is also obviously conspiracy to, basically try to force people to testify in his favor, even to the extent of actually lying on oath, which we saw yesterday at the Constitutional Court. And various other charges, and not to mention military insurrection, which is also a potential charge that could be, levied against Yoon. And so depending on what crimes will constitute the indictment, that will determine the length of the trial. Just by a reference, in Park Geun-hye's case, the initial trial actually took close to a year until the verdict came down after she was actually indicted. And I suspect that Yoon will use every trick in the book to try to delay the criminal proceedings as well. And so it might be even longer than a year.
So this latest development came as the Corruption Investigation Office for high-ranking officials has sent this case to the prosecution and requested for an indictment. Professor Lee, what do you think is the reason behind their early transmission decision to the prosecution?
Right. So the CIO was essentially getting nowhere with President Yoon since he was not being cooperative. When the CIO eventually got to investigate and actually question President Yoon, they initially had him for about over 10 hours. But essentially, he refused to give any responses, any statements to them. And basically, his argument was, and also through him personally, but also through his lawyers, that basically the CIO was, beyond its jurisdiction in terms of questioning the president for the specific crime of insurrection and treason, because the CIO itself doesn't have the authority to investigate technically that crime, as well as or for that matter, bring an indictment. So he was trying to use that basis to sort of argue that the CIO, since it lacked jurisdiction over him to investigate, that he was justified by refusing essentially to answer questions. And by the way, that's of course the right of any criminal suspect, that you have the right to remain silent. And so what he did essentially was to exercise that right with respect to the CIO. And so CIO itself, because it was really getting nowhere with President Yoon, decided essentially to cut its losses and then shift him over to the prosecutor. And the idea here is that because the prosecutor presumably has the power to indict and then to actually bring the formal criminal trial to start, that the CIO had no interest to sort of maintain its position vis-a-vis Yoon in this case, and to then send him over. But I think this is really kind of puts the CIO at a sort of a crossroads at some level, because the CIO has had some difficulty in the past by trying to deal with people who are high-ranking officials and not really being able to follow through its investigations. And so I suspect that because of this, there'll have to be some reform of the CIO if this is going to be a viable investigative body. But in any event, the CIO really had nothing to do more, and so therefore it sent the case over to the prosecutors to have better luck on President Yoon.
Right. So despite the risks about its existence, they proceeded with sending it to the prosecution. Then, Professor Cho, we are aware that President Yoon has continually refused to cooperate with the CIO. Do you think he would comply with the prosecution's investigation this time around?
He will certainly meet with them at least once. Now, I understand that even ordinarily, Yoon used to make very denigrating remarks about CIO. Now, Yoon is nothing if not an elitist, and he used to refer to CIO as a third-rate agency. And so not only was CIO's investigation in his eyes illegal, but he essentially didn't want to stoop down to having to answer questions from what he considered to be a third-rate agency, whereas prosecution office is basically home, where he spent his entire career almost. And he probably will expect more favorable treatment, although whether prosecution office will give him that, I'm not sure. But he will certainly make them probably come and visit him at the detention center rather than deigning to actually turn himself up for questioning at the prosecution office. And so it basically, playing the power game right until the end. But just in relation to CIO, I do want to mention that CIO was an agency that was really half-baked from the very beginning. And that was because the reforms that were attempted of the prosecution office under Moon administration were at every turn blocked by the then opposition, now the ruling party, the Conservative Party. And so given that CIO has, limited number of personnel, they've got 60 officers altogether, as opposed to 3,000 at the prosecution office. The prosecution office also has some 4,000 investigation officers. So if you are looking at the actual capacity of the offices, you just can't compare the two agencies.
Right. So since Yoon has been, not really acknowledging the CIO, his side has issued a stern warning saying that we will hold the CIO legally accountable for its unlawful investigation and illegal actions. Professor, what does the legal responsibility mentioned by President Yoon's side imply?
It really doesn't bear any real proper analysis. It's just bluffing on Yoon's part. And it's been confirmed by the court numerous times that what CIO was doing in terms of investigation and issuing of arrest warrant and detention warrant was completely legal. And so I don't really think they have any justified legal ground to argue that what CIO was doing was illegal. I think it's really for the purposes of, once again, gathering support from Yoon's diehard supporters, basically.
Right, so more of a political motive. Now let's move on to the fourth trial session that was held on Thursday. The first witness, former Minister of Defense Kim Jong-un's face-to-face encounter with President Yoon has garnered a lot of attention, but there was no partition between the two sides. Professor Cho, how would you generally assess the testimonies made yesterday? How did you see it?
Well, the term testimonies is an interesting one because to me, it seemed like they were mostly perjuries rather than testimonies. I mean, seriously, the partition was requested initially because there was concern that the witness, Kim Jong-un, the former defense minister, might be under pressure from Yoon, who was his former boss, to essentially perjure himself and give testimonies that are favorable to Yoon, even though they may not be true. But they didn't really have to. that was needless worry because obviously the two had somehow communicated with each other and decided to tell a very nice fairy tale to the Constitutional Court judges. But I think they really selected their audience very badly because the judges asked very sharp, very pointed questions that just laid bare how implausible and incredible the testimony that Kim Jong-un was giving to try to somehow take all the blame for himself and to claim that, Yoon was really not at fault in this whole illegal martial law declaration that he'd made.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to touch upon the minister's remarks as we discussed, but I want to ask Professor Lee too, what were your takeaways from yesterday's session?
Well, I thought the whole situation with the president being in the same room with the Minister of Defense at the Constitutional Court to be, extraordinary. I mean, given the seriousness and the gravity of the whole event itself, I think as a trial, just being a lawyer myself and being in the circumstances of being in a trial, but having the highest political officers to be in a courtroom of that nature, and then having to take questions from the judges themselves, and of course, I mean, extraordinarily too, with President Yoon even asking questions and delivering remarks. So I mean, just the biggest takeaway for me was just again this extraordinary nature of the situation and the venue. But I mean, essentially, one thing I was thinking about as I was sort of listening to the testimony and reviewing what was said is what were the judges, and I think President Joe sort of touched on this a little bit in terms of how the judges would perceive the credibility of the witnesses and the veracity of the testimony, because when you look at sort of what's being said in court and in testimony that's being given, you're going to think about, is this person believable? And given the circumstances and the way that's being spun, from various places, obviously whether you're on the President Yoon side of things or sort of you're on the other side in terms of the National Assembly. The real issue is credibility, and so the question, I guess, is really, I think, being played out here is what being said really something that is believable or not? And it's not just the testimony of force itself from the individuals like the Minister of Defense, right? And President Yoon, I imagine at some point will give his own testimony, but there's documentary evidence, there's evidence that's being presented on different levels, the soldiers that were involved, the commanders, so all that will be sort of brought together, right, by the court itself to then make a decision. But I just, the biggest takeaway for me was just the extraordinary nature of the whole event itself by having these people sitting in a trial of this nature at the highest levels.
Right, of course, Kim would be definitely pressured a lot with the situation there. But mentioning about the credibility of the witness, a battle of truth between President Yoon and former Minister Kim was kind of expected to unfold. But during the witness testimony, former Minister Kim accepted the claims of President Yoon's side and kind of took sole responsibility for the state of emergency. So based on his statement, could we understand that he personally wrote the proclamation and that President Yoon did not thoroughly review it? And could this be interpreted as what he essentially was planning and executing the state of emergency himself?
Well, I mean, he's clearly falling on his own sword here. And that's sort of the question, is whether that, again, is believable or not, because the thought that he drafted the declaration and the promulgation itself for the martial law order, and the president really didn't take the time as he normally would to review such a document, seems quite implausible given the severity of what they were trying to do. And martial law, of course, is one of the most serious acts that you can undertake if you're the president, and not having the president himself not reviewing the document in detail before then executing the whole martial law decree is, at some level kind of, unbelievable. But I mean, when we talk about this whole circumstance, and we have to remember that what the court is trying to decide here is not, I mean, there's some technical legal questions, issues that are being raised here, and the court has sort of identified, certain areas where they're going to be investigating, and presumably, if the severity of what's found in terms of whether or not, for example, if there's obstruction, or whether the announcement itself was, impermissible under a Korean law, or searching and seizing the election commission, for instance, by using the military, whether that was improper or an abuse of authority. I mean, really, despite this particular claim by the Minister of Defense for sort of instituting, promulgating the martial law order decree, is just one small among many kinds of accusations are being made, which the court has to evaluate. And so, if the court deems that the severity of the violations of anything that's being accused of by the president, despite the minister's, accepting of responsibility for what happened, the court then can proceed to then impeach the president. So, what I take from this is, again, you have to sort of, I guess, take it with a grain of salt in terms of the minister himself, whether, again, he's believable. But then, following through, the president has to make the decision. And ultimately, the buck stops with the president, right? He's the highest executive officer, and whatever the ministers advise him to do, they only give him advice, right? They propose, but the president has to decide, and ultimately he's the one that's responsible. So in this case, if the court deems him to be, of course, ultimately responsible for the actual martial law declaration and the subsequent events that occurred afterwards, and whether or not he in fact then ordered troops to do certain things, then I think we're going to look at the real possibility for impeachment here by the judges. So I think that's what we're going to have to be looking forward to in terms of beyond just the minister's statement himself, because this is just at the beginning of the testimony. A lot more, of course, will be borne out in the course of the testimony, as well as the presentation of evidence. So we're just really at the early stages here, and we'll have to wait and see in terms of what more comes out in terms of this particular trial.
Right. So we have a lot of questions about the credibility and the court's decision. But at this point, we must be curious. Ben, what is it for former Defense Minister Kim? He has been consistently defending President Yoon, and even while in detention. And he also did that again during his testimony yesterday. Professor Cho, why do you think this is the case? Is this kind of a legal tactic, or how do you read behind this?
Well, initially, we all thought that former defense minister was really doing his utmost to try to defend Yoon to the end. But having heard his testimony from yesterday, and also its effect on the justices on the Constitutional Court, one has to wonder whether Kim is really trying to defend Yoon, because I think Kim's really, nudged at least the two conservative justices that people were concerned would be voting against impeaching Yoon that much closer to actually voting for, because those two, Jung Hyung-sik and Kim Hyung-do, two, dyed-in-the-wool conservative justices, were asking some of the most pointed questions at Kim yesterday. And the thing was, Kim was contradicting himself while giving testimony before the Constitutional Court. And he also contradicted the previous evidence that he had given while he was being questioned by the prosecution office. Now, Acting Chief Justice Jeon Hyung-bae asked Kim two questions, one of which was, do you confirm that you actually testified at the prosecution office and verify the statements that you had given to the prosecution office? And Kim confirmed, yes, I did. He even confirmed that, yes, his lawyer was present and he read and signed the statements that he had made to the prosecution office. Now, the statements that he had given to the prosecution office basically contradicts almost 99% of the testimony that he actually gave before the Constitutional Court. And what he also did was Yoon's team basically objected to having the martial law decree number 1 admitted into evidence. But because he consistently referred to the decree, the justice actually said, well, we're going to accept it as evidence. And that particular decree plus, Yoon's statements basically go to prove that he was acting completely unconstitutionally by making it illegal for the National Assembly to conduct any political activity. So he was really nailing the coffin of Yoon. And so whether he was really defending Yoon, that might have been his intention, because he sees his fate inextricably tied together with Yoon's. But the effect of it is the opposite.
Mm-hmm. So as we wait for the legal proceedings to unfold, it will be really crucial to see how this dynamic shapes both legal strategy and the political landscape moving forward. But for now, we'll have to leave our discussion here. Thank you so much for your insights tonight, Professor Lee and Professor Cho. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
That'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Till then, stay informed and engaged.
My name is Veronica and I'm the co-founder of the K-beauty brand Yepuda.
My name is Sander and I'm the co-founder of Yepuda. So I'm half Korean, half Dutch, and I traveled to Korea once a year to visit my family in Korea.
When we started traveling together to Korea, I immediately was captured by the insane beauty culture there. There were so many stores, so many cool products, a lot of things that I never saw in Europe before. So at some point we started talking about it and decided maybe it's a good idea to not bring suitcases back to Europe, but to really build a brand for K-beauty for the European market.
I think the Korean beauty industry is a lot ahead in terms of innovation, in terms of new formulation, in terms of new product development. And next to that, Korean beauty is also known for using more natural ingredients into their formulations, instead of only harsh chemical ingredients.
So all of our products